واتل ما أوحي إليك من كتاب ربك لا مبدل لكلماته ولن تجد من دونه ملتحدا.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala with the tafsir of Surah Al-Kahf from the tafsir of Imam Al-Sa'di rahimahullah, and ayah number 25 inshallah. Ayah number 25 and hopefully to 27 inshallah ta'ala. يقول الله عز وجل: ولبثوا في كهفهم 300 سنين وازدادوا 9 قل الله أعلم بما لبثوا له غيب السماوات والأرض أبصر به وأسمع ما لهم من دونه من ولي ولا يشرك في حكمه أحدا واتل ما أوحي إليك من كتاب ربك لا مبدل لكلماته ولن تجد من دونه ملتحدا. The translation: and they remained in their cave for 300 years and exceeded by 9. Say, Allah is most knowing of how long they remained. He has knowledge of the unseen of the heavens and the earth. How seeing is He and how hearing. They have not besides Him any protector, and He shares not His legislation with anyone. And recite what has been revealed to you of the book of your Lord. There is no changer of His words, and never will you find in other than Him a refuge. So this is still with what's mentioned about the people of the cave, Ashabul Kahf, and the fitna, the trial that they went through. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised them and elevated their levels and made their affairs a miracle for people and an ayah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those who come after them to learn from it how to be firm and how to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that al-aqiba, the end for such individuals, are the best. And what matters is how the end of things are. And everybody shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the many great benefits that are mentioned with regards to even to refer all matters to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the previous verses, we went through some of the benefits that he mentioned in the tafsir of ayah number 23 and 24, and benefits that we practically do with regards to what a person forgets the remembrance of Allah, saying insha'Allah, and many other things. So then after that, the ayah says, وَلَبِثُوا فِي كَهْفِهِمْ 300 سِنِينَ وَازْدَادُوا 9. So this is with regards to the time that they stayed in the cave. He says here, Imam Al-Sa'di rahimahullah, لما نهاه الله عن استفتاء أهل الكتاب في شأن أهل الكهف. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام from istifta, from asking fatwa, from asking the people of the book with regards to the affairs of the people of the cave, as it's previously mentioned, لعدم علمهم بذلك, because they have no knowledge of it whatsoever. So since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, and this is verse number 22, the end of it, وَلَا تَسْتَفْتِ فِيهِمْ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدًا. Do not tastafti, do not ask any one of them whatsoever about the people of the cave, meaning the people of the book. And before that, فَلَا تُمَارِ فِيهِمْ إِلَّا مِرَاءً ظَاهِرًا. So don't argue, don't go back and forth. It's a matter of unseen, and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the knowledge of the unseen, and do not ask the people of the book, any of them, about it whatsoever. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and the reason why this is because they have no knowledge of it. And that's why you would find in their books, as it's mentioned in the books of the Tafseer, Allah knows best how accurate that statement is, but some said, according to the books of the Tafseer from the Israeliyat, they claim 240 years they stayed, things like this. So that means it's wrong. Is there a benefit in knowing this or not with the years? We only know what is benefiting as what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals in the Quran. And part of which is the Quran teaches us what to be concerned about and what not to be concerned about, and to refer the matter all to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عالم الغيب والشهادة العالم بكل شيء. And since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the knower of the unseen, of the heavens and the earth, and what's seen, the knower of all things, أخبره الله بمدة لبثهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned or informed the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام how long they stayed. And whether the others they agree or not, it's irrelevant, doesn't matter. This is wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we see from Surah Al-An'am and in the Surah, the Quran teaches us that the wahy is the most important thing. If you leave it to the human beings are ignorant. And that's why people have to hold fast to the wahy, to the revelation from Allah. أخبره الله بمدة لبثهم وأن علم ذلك عنده وحده. That the knowledge of that is only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وحده. فإنه من غيب السماوات والأرض. It's from the unseen of the heavens and the earth. وغيبها مختص به. And the غيب of the heavens and the earth مختص. That means it's only to be known from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-ikhtisas is when something is special, when something is only confined to one thing or the other. So no one knows, and no exception whatsoever, what's unseen unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals. And he mentions that because the next ayah, which is 26, says قُلِ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا لَبِثُوا لَهُ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Always the تقديم والتأخير to the position of the words. One come before the other in this context because it تفيد الاختصاص. It gives this meaning of الاختصاص that it's exclusive to Allah. له غيب السماوات والأرض. To him, it starts with to him. That means it's only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala غيب السماوات والأرض, the unseen of the heavens and the earth. وغيبها مختص به فما أخبر به عنها على ألسنة رسله فهو الحق اليقين. So whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أخبر, informed about how long they stayed or about anything in general على ألسنة رسله. From al-lisan is the tongue. So that means the wahy. The only way to know the wahy is through the messengers of Allah. There's no other way. So to the wahy, they are the ones that receives the wahy from Allah. It sounds very obvious, but the practicality of it, sometimes the actions of the people does not come in line with what would they agree with as a principle and as a foundation. Nobody would doubt. Yes, the wahy is the thing that we follow. And the only way there's wahy is through the messengers of Allah. This is their job. So are we upon this in every aspect of our life? That's why even in the very details and small details about the bid'ah innovations in the deen, it's a major thing. It's not about the small bid'ah and major bid'ah. It's what's in the heart of the person. That the person allow himself to get what's supposed to be wahy from other than the messengers of Allah. Is it something that is permissible for a person even to have something in that in their hearts? Whether it's a matter of belief, which is ghaib, or whether it's matters of ibadah. So it's only through the messengers of Allah. Find the messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. فما أخبر به عنها على ألسنة رسله فهو الحق اليقين الذي لا يشك فيه. This is the certainty, the truth, with certainty that there is no doubt in it whatsoever. وما لا يطلع رسله عليه. And what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not inform his messengers. And اطلاع, يطلع is, we talked about it before, is when you look from above. That's physically. But also it refers to informing or revealing. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not inform and make the messengers know, فَإِنَّ أَحَدًا مِّنَ الْخَلْقِ لَا يَعْلَمُ. Then none of the creation of Allah knows. So even if they don't have certainty in what the messengers they have sent with, how can they act upon it with certainty? So that's why even there's valid differences of opinions, because maybe the wahy can be understood in many different ways. This is a valid thing. But the differences of opinions, or for the validity of differences of opinions, one is saying something from their own selves other than the messengers of Allah, and someone else is referring to what the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with. That's not a difference of opinion. It's not a valid thing to start with. Why? Because this is wahy versus something else. So, and he says, وَقَوْلُهُ أَبْصِرْ بِهِ وَأَسْمِعْ. أَبْصِرْ بِهِ وَأَسْمِعْ. This is ta'ajjub. This is تعجب. Being what's أسلوب التعجب is when you say how amazing the matter is. تعجب من كمال سمعه وبصره وإحاطته. من تعجب من كمال سمعه وبصره. That the perfect sam'a, hearing and the seeing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is nothing is the like of it whatsoever. So أسمع به وأبصر, that means how great is the seeing and how great is the hearing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that no one can comprehend whatsoever. So أبصر به وأسمع, that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all seer of what they do and he's the all hearer subhanahu wa ta'ala. And أسلوب التعجب is when you're amazed of something and you depends on many different contexts. Of course, is here. This is, as Imam al-Tabari rahimahullah he says, this is مبالغة في المدح. This is being not extreme in a strange way. This is the perfect praise of Allah. No matter how much you praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond that. So أبصر به وأسمع, how amazing, how great is the seeing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the hearing of Allah that no one can ever comprehend whatsoever. And this is for anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. Nothing is hidden from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He sees their actions. He listens to what they say. So أبصر به وأسمع. تعجب من كمال سمعه وبصره. And the تعجب here that no one, because no one can has the ability to comprehend the essence of it, because it's beyond one's understanding. وإحاطتهما بالمسموعات والمبصرات. And إحاطتهما, both the سمع and the بصر, that's in the مثنى, in the dual tense, that how it encompasses every مسموعات and every مبصرات, anything that can be heard and anything that can be seen. Not necessarily with the weakness of the human beings, because we don't hear anything. We don't hear everything, right? We hear only what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted for us to hear with our capacity as human beings, and this is physically, it's well known. And the same thing with what we see. Even with what we see with our own eyes, we don't see everything in it from what we see it. And the more they look into things with microscopes, the more you see things that you're not able to see with your eyes. And people think that they reached the end of it. No, they didn't reach the end of it. This is just an ayah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a sign from Allah for people to humble themselves, that there are so many things beyond what people can see and what they can hear. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His knowledge encompasses everything. بعدما أخبر بإحاطة علمي بالمعلومات. After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned His knowledge encompasses everything, also His seeing and hearing encompasses everything. And even what's in the hearts, and He sees what's in the hearts, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and the creation of Allah that we're not able to see. The jinn, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the shaitan, إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُمْ هُوَ قَبِيلٌ حَيْثُ لَا تَرَوْنَهُمْ. He sees you where you don't see him. So the ability that Allah gave the shaitan to see the human beings, and the inability of the human beings not to see Iblis, all of that is by the power of Allah. And this is all to show the knowledge of Allah that encompasses everything. ثم أخبر عن انفراده بالولاية العامة والخاصة. Then after that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned ما لهم من دونه من ولي ولا يشرك في حكمه أحدا. انفراده, that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has al-wilaya, the protection and the support, whether it's in the general sense or the specific sense. Al-amma to all of the creation of Allah. Al-khassa is to the believers, which is the help and the victory and the steadfastness and all means of goodness that would make them fulfill the purpose of their life. And the wilaya al-amma, that means all of the creation of Allah under the protection of Allah. فهو الولي الذي يتولى تدبير جميع الكون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-wali, the protector, the supporter, the helper, the one that is in charge of tadbir and maintaining all of the universe. None but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the al-wilaya al-amma. That nothing happens except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the will of Allah and by the actions of Allah. وَالْوَلِيُّ لِعِبَادِهِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. This is al-khassa. And He subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-wali to His believing slaves, the believers. What is al-wilaya al-khassa, the special wilaya? He's their protector, supporter, their helper. يُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. He takes them out from the darknesses to the light. وييسرهم لليسرى. He make the easy matters for them easy for them. ويجنبهم العسرى. And he made them stay away from what's difficult. And all of it with matters of their deen. So the believers and the disbelievers, they're both together in the same, under the same wilayah of Allah when it comes to physical matters. He's the provider for them. He's the one that sustains their life. So when someone is saved as he thinks, he's saved from imminent danger, right? Someone in, a huge piece of wall or a brick falling down, and just for a split of a second, he moved and it did not hit him, right? Does that mean that this person has been chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because he's such a great human being? It doesn't mean anything, right? This is something that can happen to the worst person on the face of earth, and it can happen to the best person on the face of earth. But this is under the wilayah al-amma. This is the general wilayah of Allah. And actually it can happen as a fitna for a person. It can happen as a test for a person to be deviated even more, to live more, to spread corruption on the face of earth. Right? Al-wilayah al-khassa is when someone, anything happens, whether it's physically or religiously, that makes the person firm upon the deen. This is al-wilayah al-khassa. This is the special wilayah, that a person is fulfilling the purpose of his life. That he's a Muslim, he's a believer, he follows the way the Prophet ﷺ, he's able to fulfill the commands of Allah, and all of that is added to what has been mentioned before in the previous verses. Just the fact even that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds the believer to make remembrance of Allah. This is from the wilayah al-khassa, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps that believer not to be forgetful and to seek knowledge and to be obedient to Allah. It's a detailed subject, but this is something that a person then would make him humble, refer every matter to Allah. وَالْوَلِيُّ لِعِبَادِهِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ يُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. He takes them out from darknesses to the light. وَيُيَسِّرُهُم لِلْيُسْرَى وَيُجَنِّبُهُم الْعُسْرَى. وَلِهَذَا قال ما لهم من دونه من ولي. They have none besides him any wali. And if it refers to the people of Al-Kahf, أي هو الذي تولى أصحاب الكهف بلطفه وكرمه. He subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, the one that tawalla, took care of the people of Al-Kahf, بلطفه, with his subtle mercy subhanahu wa ta'ala and his generosity. ولم يكلهم إلى أحد من الخلق. He did not make them rely and give them to someone else to take care of them. He does not ask someone, he does not refer their affairs to any of the creation of Allah. Even if the means of protection was by the creation of Allah, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that made these creation of Allah to be there for the people of the cave or others to fulfill the will of Allah. So the sun, وَتَرَى الشَّمْسَ إِذَا طَلَعَتْ, and the place of the cave, and the dog, and the fact that they look unpleasant if someone wants to see them. All of these means that we talked about, this is not the thing that the wilayah was from it, the protection from these things. And if it wasn't these things, they would have not been protected. And no, this is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why, as we know, that shirk al-khafiyyi, even the hidden shirk, as Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma and others, when they said that when a person would say, as his famous quote, لولا البط فالدار لسرق الدار. If it wasn't for the ducks in the house would have been stolen. Right? Not having the heart fully relying upon Allah and seeing that everything is by Allah. The bat, the ducks, the dog, the security system, yeah, you put that for means, but these are means. But who's the one that protects, and who's the one that make these means work and created them, and all of this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why everything is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala بِلُطْفِهِ وَكَرَمِهِ to the people of Al-Kahf. وَلَمْ يَكِلْهُمْ إِلَىٰ أَحَدٍ مِّنَ الْخَلْقِ. He did not make them rely upon any of the creation of Allah, and they took the perfect means according to their capacity. Let's go to the cave, this and that, according to what they know, and they refer every matter to Allah. وَلَا يُشْرِكُ فِي حُكْمِهِ أَحَدًا. And he does not associate أحدا, anyone, في حكمه, in his hukm, in his commands, in his legislation, whether it's al-kawni or al-shar'i, the universal one or the religious ones. He says وهذا يشمل الحكم الكوني القدري والحكم الشرعي ad-dini. So we have, as we have in many other things, al-hukm is one of them. Al-hukm, there is either hukm kawni, universal, physical, hukm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-qadari, that we get to know it by the qadar of Allah. When things happens, why did it happen? This is all by the judgment of Allah, by the decree of Allah. No one is a partner with Allah in matters of decree. No one comes and meet once a year from the creation of Allah to decide of the qadar of Allah next year. This is an act of kufr if someone believes this foolish and silly things. No one is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a partner when it comes to the qadar of Allah. والحكم الشرعي ديني, and the same thing with الحكم الشرعي, the religious hukm from Allah. Do this, do not do that, halal, haram, and so on. فإنه الحاكم لا يشرك. Not even prophets of Allah. They're not partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to the hukm. So وما أتاكم الرسول فخذوه. What the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to you with, you take. This is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ما يطع الرسول فقد أطاع الله. Whoever obeys Allah, whoever obeys the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he indeed obeyed Allah. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he does not speak from his desire, he speaks from revelation from Allah. فإنه الحاكم في خلقه قضاء وقدرا وخلقا وتدبيرا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-hakim, the ruler in his creation. قضاء وقدرا, with the qada of Allah, with the destiny of Allah, the qadar, every measure, وخلقا, and creation, وتدبيرا, and maintaining it. والحاكم فيهم, this is all of these ones in al-hukm al-kawni. So if you're following here with this line, the fifth line from the top of page 929, he mentioned these are the things which is al-hukm al-kawni. Al-hakimu fi khalqihi qada'an wa qadaran wa khalqan wa tadbira. This is all universal hukm of Allah. Qada' wa qadar, the predestiny, what Allah decreed. Khalqan, creation, tadbiran, maintaining their affairs and their life. And then after that, wal-hakimu fihim, this is the al-hukm al-shar'i, ad-dini, the religious one. بأمره, by his commands, ونهيه, and what he forbids, وثوابه وعقابه, and the rewards and the punishment. And if لا مشاحة في الاصطلاح, there's no problem if people make all kinds of categories of things to make it easy for them to remember. As some would say, well, الحاكم أو الحكم الجزائي, ثواب والعقاب, this is the جزاء حكم, this is the recompense and also from Allah. Or this is part of al-hukm al-shar'i, because this is the outcome and the reward of the recompense of al-hukm al-shar'i with regards to al-amr wal-nahy. So وَلَا يُشْرِكُ فِي حُكْمِهِ أَحَدًا, none with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is partners with Allah in his hukm whatsoever. لا معقب لحكمه, no one is to change the hukm of Allah. Or التعقيب is when someone have istidrak. They would say, if it was like this, it would have been, better. Whether it's, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, if someone says that, this is an act of disbelief. Whether it's from the qadar of Allah, something bad happens to a person, he should push away from his heart even the thought that if it was like this, it would have been better for me. When it comes from the actions of Allah, none of that should be even come across. A person should push it away, because this is what already Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is after it happened. This is what already Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed. You question yourself, you blame yourself, sure, to fix your faults, to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all kinds of things like this. But when it comes to the actions of Allah, not even to mention anything as a ta'qib ala hukmillah, or of course, which is very obvious, the religious matters. If riba was permissible in this case, one's life would have been easier. This is an act of disbelief for someone to, al-'adhu billah, think that way. And whenever waswas comes like this, a person should push it away from himself. So he says, وَلَمَّا أَخْبَرَ أَنَّهُ تَعَالَى لَهُ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ فَلَيْسَ لِمَخْلُوقٍ إِلَيْهَا طَرِيقٌ إِلَّا عَنِ الطَّرِيقِ الَّتِي يُخْبِرُ بِهَا عِبَادَهُ. So when Allah, since everything is since, therefore, this is how things with the verses of the Quran. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed that belongs to him the unseen of the heavens and the earth, and none of the makhluqeen, the creation of Allah, has a path, a way to it, unless it's the path or the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would inform them of the wahy, of the ghaib. So the ghaib is unseen. Is there a way where people can figure it out? There's no way except from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the way of Allah is through the messengers of Allah. So everyone and anyone to give up on this. There is no such a thing except through the messengers of Allah. وكان هذا القرآن, this is one since. This is a fact. Usually what you say since, that means these are facts. Everybody should agree to, and then the therefore comes afterwards. وكان هذا القرآن قد اشتمل على كثير من الغيوب. And since this Quran اشتمل includes many of the غيوب, many of the unseen, أمر تعالى بالإقبال عليه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then commanded the people to come forward to the book of Allah, because this is the only way to know the unseen. And this is the most important concern for a human being on the face of earth and for the believers, is to know the unseen. Nothing more important than to know al-ghaib. Because to know the ghaib, to believe in it and to act upon it. And the entire deen of Allah is upon this. It's not upon a shahada. The deen is not upon what we see. It's upon al-ghaib. Because if it's upon this, what is seen, people are the same when it comes to seeking the means. It's upon the ghaib. And al-ghaib is what? Believe in this. That's ghaib. This is aqidah. Without it, there's no religion. This is halal, this is haram. This is ghaib when it comes to the actual halal versus that it's haram. We got to know that from the unseen, from the wahy from Allah. It's not from by trial and error. It's not because people get together then they made this decision, or it looks that way, or it seems that way. No, it's wahy from Allah. And that's why there's no need for a person to make himself tired to figure out the wisdom behind this and the wisdom behind that. Why this is haram, why this is halal. The wisdom behind it, it's all limited, and it's all, most of it is of no benefit whatsoever. Do the ulama talk about the wisdom behind things? Yes. There's no, it's not haram in this, but all within the wahy from Allah. But they look at the wisdom to affect their actions? No. The actions is already finished when it comes to why the actions, because the ghaib, they believe in the ghaib, that this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's the only way for a person to know it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the wahy from Allah. The more the person understands these meanings, the more the religion becomes very clear. And a person would be then busy with what a person should be upon. So, and this Quran has this. Then the next ayah, وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ لَا مُبَدِّلَ لِكَلِمَاتِهِ وَلَنْ تَجِدَ مِنْ دُونِهِ مُلْتَحَدًا. So, وَاتْلُ, this is now the command from Allah. Make the tilawa, recite. And what is a tilawa means? Talked about that before. He said it right away, right, the word after. التلاوة هي الاتباع. التلاوة is following. That's what التلاوة is. Our brother, he gave us a nice tilawa yesterday. That means what? That means he recited the Quran to us. For what? The tilawatul Quran is to follow the Quran. It's used for the recitation of the Quran, but that's what's the meaning of it. It's not recite. And that's why the translation is limited. It's different than when you hear, and now we have tilawatul Quran. That means what? If we really have the essence of how the language affects our hearts, that means Quran is going to be recited for you to follow. So وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ أي اتبع ما أوحى الله إليك بمعرفة معانيه وفهمه وتصديق أخباره وامتثال أوامره ونواهيه. So that means follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to you by knowing its معاني, بمعرفة معانيه وفهمها, and understanding it, وتصديق أخباره, and to believe in the أخبار, what you have been informed of in the Quran, وامتثال أوامره ونواهيه, and to follow, to be obedient to the commands of Allah and to be away from the nawahi, what's forbidden. فإنه الكتاب الجليل. This is the exalted kitab, the book, الذي لا مبدل لكلماته واتل ما أوحي إليك. So all of that is related to what's mentioned before. Recite, follow what have been revealed to you من كتاب ربك, from the book of your Lord. And why it says من كتاب ربك. So the significance of this. لا مبدل لكلماته, no changing to its words. أي لا تغير. كلمات الله does not change. ولا تبدل, and it does not get replaced. لصدقها وعدلها, because it's truthful and it is just. وبلوغها من الحسن فوق كل غاية, and it reached the beauty beyond and above every limit and every objective. And that's include الناسخ والمنسوخ, the abrogated verses and things like this. That's part of this, and this is all by the wisdom of Allah. وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ صِدْقًا وَعَدْلًا. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the word of your Lord has been completed, perfected. صِدْقًا في الأخبار. صِدْقًا, that means truthful in the news, in what we are informed of matters of wahy. وَعَدْلًا في الأحكام. And عدلا, just in the rulings from Allah. فلكمالها, and because of its kamal, its perfection, استحال عليها التغيير والتبديل. It's impossible for it to be changed or to be replaced. So فلو كانت ناقصة لعرض لها ذلك أو شيء منه. If it was ناقصة, if it was deficient, then any of this would have been presented to it, or some of it, meaning التغيير, التبديل, to change. وفي هذا تعظيم للقرآن في ضمنه الترغيب على الإقبال عليه. So this is تعظيم of the Quran, which is what that means. متضمن to that is that you are encouraged to come forward and to read and to reflect and to memorize and to act. ولن تجد من دونه ملتحدا, and you won't find من دونه, from other than him, meaning your Lord, ملتحدا. What's ملتحدا? Refuge. أي لن تجد من دون ربك ملجأ تلجأ إليه. You would never find other than your Lord a refuge that you can seek protection in. ولا معاذا. معاذا, also the refuge. تعوذ به, that you would seek refuge in protection. Al-malja is the place where a person save himself physically. And al-ma'adh is, which is only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protection in its general sense. فإذا تعين أنه وحده الملجأ, if this is clearly stated now, that he, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the only one that people seek help from, and he's the refuge. في كل الأمور, in all matters, تعين أن يكون هو, then تعين becomes mandatory, that he subhanahu wa ta'ala al-ma'luh, al-marghub ilayhi fi as-sara'i wad-dara'i, the one to be worshipped, the one for people to seek him and his rewards in matters of ease and matters of difficulty. Al-muftaqar ilayhi, that everyone is in need of him في جميع الأحوال, in all other affairs. المسؤول في جميع المطالب, the one to be asked in every matlab, in every thing that people seek. And this is how the level or the Quran should be in the hearts, because of what's in it of matters of unseen, and even what's mentioned about the people of the Kahf and the lessons to be learned from that. It's unlimited, really. And what we just the tafsir, if we reflect upon it, just open the door, because once we know the meaning, then what is left is for the heart needs to be keep on working on it, and to take your heart to more details in every matter. When it says in all of your affairs, is there exception? There's no exception. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-malja. That means you seek refuge in Allah from every matter, none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they were elevated, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was pleased with them. And they were أهل التقوى وكانوا أحق بها وأهلها وألزمهم كلمة التقوى وكانوا أحق بها وأهلها. That the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, that Allah made them upon a taqwa, and they were the ones that had the right to it, and they were the people of taqwa. Someone to reach that level of praise, Allah is saying about them, they are the people of the taqwa, they are the owners of it. They are the ones that deserves to be upon this. What did they do? It's nothing but their relationship with the book of Allah, with the wahy from Allah, with the Quran, and how that this is the ghaib that they received, the most important thing, following it and believing in it, and applying it in their lives and the lives of others. Stop here, inshallah ta'ala, because of the time, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit from what we heard, inshallah. طيب, the attendance code is Al-Basir and As-Sami'. Al-Basir, As-Sami'. Can we connect this verse to the above ayah and say to follow the Quran is the cave and protect us from all forms of shirk and all other harms? As mentioned before, with the benefits, there's no limits. And the Quran is the cave was the refuge for the people of the cave, because that's the only place where they go. That's what refuge means. It means you don't have any other choice. And that's how al-malja is. If there's other choices, they might have taken some other choices, but this is what al-malja is. So since the cave was their only choice, and it seems to be not the best choice if someone have something else, but because their iman, their deen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made this cave, which is physically not the most pleasant thing, to be the most beautiful thing for them. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He's the one that was their malja. They sought the protection of Allah, not the protection of the kahf, not the protection of the cave, but they sought the protection of Allah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed their situation. And that's why, as mentioned, Sheikh ibn Baz rahimahullah, he says every believer should have his own kahf. You have to have your own cave that you go to, whether it's physically, meaning your home, your place where you make your salah, where you have control over, by the will of Allah, over the environment that you're in. And also, this is how the Quran is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that people seek help from. نعم. بارك الله فيك. بارك الله فيك. جزاكم الله خيرا. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.